A very good morning to all of you and a very happy Basant Panchami. A little more than 4 decades ago, when I joined the National Defence Academy, or passed out from IMA as a young second lieutenant, the normal mode of greetings amongst the armed forces officers used to be as per hour of the day. Good morning, good evening. And with the men, it used to be as per the regimental traditions. It could be Ram Ram, Sat Sri Akal, Tagda Raho, Jai Durga, etc. Couple of years back, the three services spontaneously and voluntarily switched on to Jai Hind, the salutation coined by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose for the Indian National Army. It was not only a salutation, but a unified identity that bypassed creed and caste, a prerequisite for a stable national framework. It embodied patriotism and instilled national pride. Jai Hind literally translates into victory to India. This victory, visualized by Netaji, was to be gained by the collective effort of all Indians. Even today, securing that independent India, which he got us, or a sovereign India, requires a cohesive and a whole of government kind of an approach. This month of January, it marks the auspicious beginning of a new year. January, if I may say, is a month of actually festivals, not religious festivals. These are secular, non-religious, nationalist festivals. 12th of January was National Youth Day. We commemorate Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary. 15th of January was Army Day. Today we are here on Parakram Divas, that's Subhash Chandra Bose's birthday. On 26th, we are going to be celebrating the joy of being free and being a republic. And on 30th, it will be Martyrs' Day, when the father of nation fell down to assassin's bullet. For me, it's a matter of great privilege to be here at the JNU on Parakram Divas and on this auspicious month of January. Professor Matu has asked me to speak about the 2 books I've written lately. That's Ready, Relevant and Resurgent, Part 1 and 2. They relate to national security and warfare. More about the latter. That's, I think, because that's a bread and butter for Gs. So I'm more comfortable writing about how warfare is evolving. So the books largely contain articles on that. And I would like to thank the university and the School of International Studies for having invited me for this memorial lecture. In my view, so what I'll do is I'll speak of whatever I didn't. I'll take out 2-3 subjects from those books, and I'll speak in context of what Netaji did for that. What was his outlook on that? I'll try and connect these two. So let me speak about Netaji first. In my views, he was a true scholar statesman and an inspiring military leader. In 1943, from Singapore, he gave a call for total mobilization when he said, Delhi Chalo. That call actually aroused nationalist consciousness and exhorted all Indians to fight for India's freedom. He created an army from surrendered troops in Singapore, an army which was defeated, demotivated, disillusioned. He motivated them with a national cause and fervor to fight whom? At that time, the strongest military power of that time, Great Britain. He motivated them to find their own regiments, the British Indian Army, which contained their kith, kin, and fellow beings. That's actually a no mean achievement. This clarity of purpose resulted in raising of morale and rekindling of the fighting spirit amongst the National Army. Apart from being a soldier statesman, Netaji also, in my view, was a politico-military leader and the only politico-military leader which India has produced. As a political leader, his views on India's freedom were non-negotiable. He had a strategic foresight and vision to understand the global power dynamics of his time. Even today, as India navigates this polycentric, unstable, uncertain global disorder, Netaji's policy of assertive diplomacy and strategic realism is more relevant than ever before. He created a government, built an army, planned campaigns, negotiated alliances, managed logistics for that army, demonstrating close relationship between a political vision, astute diplomacy, and military operations. He was a military leader not because he donned a military uniform. I think he was a military leader because he led by personal example. He resigned from the Indian civil services, underwent multiple prison sentences, escaped from house arrest in Calcutta, traveled incognito all the way to Afghanistan, and from there on to Germany. He took that epic and perilous journey in a submarine all the way from Germany, including a mid-sea transfer near Madagascar into a Japanese U-boat, Japanese submarine, all with the aim of liberating India. He frequently traveled by air and visited troops to review the progress of battle, all this while risking his life. Japanese at that particular moment did not enjoy that classic air superiority, so every time he flew, his life was in danger. So from that point of view, he was classically a military leader. The full impact of INA's achievements on India's independence movement is yet to be recognized. Still lesser known is the military achievements of Indian National Army. We all know that the history is written by victors and not by the vanquished. The military history that I read as a young officer, as a middle-level officer trying to prepare for my staff college or promotional exams, was the history which was written by the British. I read books like Defeat into Victory by Field Marshal William Smith, Chindit Operations, Campaign in Burma, Road Past Mandalay, John Masters, etc. Some of these books, and including the official history recorded by the British War Office in London, portrayed the Indian National Army in very poor light. INA was poorly equipped. Its regiments did not have tanks, did not have artillery, supporting forces which are required to fight modern battles. Yet they fought, and they fought with motivation. And if you know, the attrition rate which INA suffered is the highest any army has ever suffered. The fact which is very little known. So INA as a military formation and as a movement awakened national consciousness. INA was also an expression in unity in diversity because its organization transcended region, caste, religion, or gender. Let me now talk about what I've written in these two books, which I said R, R, and R. And let me talk about emerging concept of a nation state and concept of national security first. You know, the concept of national security has evolved over a period of time. In the ancient and medieval times, it would be the sovereign himself, that would be the government, and also the military leader. The aim of security in those days was probably to protect the sovereign himself. And borders, land, people, I think they were all irrelevant. The subjects of that monarch were expendable, and land was negotiable. The Treaty of Westphalia, I think they saw the emergence of nation states. When you talk about nation, that's a concept that of common ethnic and cultural identity. It promotes emotional relationship and bonding. A state is a political unit defined in terms of territory. It provides the basis for political and legal jurisdiction. And of course, a nation state is a combination of these two. The emergence of nation states witnessed a relook at this security paradigm. And today, when we talk about national security, it's about securing those three elements, important elements that go about constituting a state, nation state. That's firstly, it's land. Secondly, it's people. And third is the ideology of that particular state. I have written in my book about national security, and I have visualized national security as three concentric circles. The outermost circles addresses the problem, how do you secure a nation? That's the outermost circle. A subset of that is middle circle, which identifies itself with the problem, how do you defend your nation? And the inner core of it, the smallest circle inside it, is about the military preparedness of a nation. So if we analyze this in detail, then probably the first one, how you secure a nation, will lead to a national security strategy. How do you defend a nation would be leading to a national defense strategy. And military preparedness of a nation would lead to a national military strategy, from which, of course, you could derive an air strategy, maritime, or a land strategy, or a theater-specific strategy. These concentric circles which I've spoken about, they work seamlessly and interact with each other. They don't work in isolated or siloed kind of compartments. So I shall be talking about in detail about how do you secure a nation, how do you defend your nation, and what is the military preparedness of a nation. And I'll do it in the context how Netaji also saw. Netaji at that particular time fought a superpower of that time and gained freedom for us. And today we are trying to preserve that freedom. Given the current geopolitical milieu and the challenges, I think the threats and challenges, I think, were comparable at both the times. So let's talk about security first. How do you secure a state? When you talk about security, you're talking about safety. You're talking about a feeling of being safe. It's the absence of fear. It's freedom to make a choice, freedom to take a decision, freedom from coercion. This concept, however, if you may say, is slightly nebulous. Walter Lippmann, American political commentator, described national security as, and I'll read, the state where a nation does not have to sacrifice its legitimate interest to avoid war and is able, if challenged, to maintain them by war. That's, I think, a very good definition, but it does not state that what all goes about in securing a state. A comprehensive national security, in my view, would be a combination of economic security, environmental security, energy security, information security, cyber, and such on. The remit of how do you secure a nation is the largest. It also takes a long-term view. That's why I have put it on the outermost circle. It is achieved by astute diplomacy and statecraft, flowing from a good understanding of the geopolitical situation, both at the global and at the regional level. For example, it requires diplomatic creativity and imagination to be part of Quad at the same time, as well as BRICS as an SCO. Such friendships and multiple groupings are required to secure a nation. To counter the influence of BRI and to secure India's long-term strategic interests, trade interests or economic interest, India became part of a multinational India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. That's taking a long-term view of how you secure yourself economically. Similarly, the ISET agreement, which we signed along with the Americans, that's Initiative of Critical and Emerging Technologies, example of how you secure a long-term technological interest and don't allow that technological gap emerging between you and your immediate competitors. So this particular concept is multidimensional. It has got multiple stakeholders, and its remit, as I said, is the largest. Let's see how Netaji looked at national security. Netaji, while fighting for India's freedom, treated the Free India movement as a legitimate state in exile. He could not have considered the idea of securing a nation if no state existed. He established a formal government in Singapore with its own bank, currency, postage stamps, thus ensuring that the struggle was recognized under international law. He was willing to engage the Axis powers, Germany and Japan, not out of an ideological alignment, but with the pragmatic application of concept that enemy's enemy is your friend. Diplomatic recognition for this fledgling state was obtained for the Azad Hind government from 9 countries. Let me talk about the middle circle, in which we say, how do you defend your nation? When you talk about defending a state, it relates to building capacities and capabilities for a state to defend itself. So hence, defense is slightly more tangible than what I talked about, security of a state. And again, this is, of course, multidimensional. It involves defensive strategy, deterrence, which essentially would come about from having or possessing the required number of weapons or wherewithal actually to defend yourself. And this gets to a question of what Ambassador Kapil Sibal was also saying, that unless we produce them indigenously, then actually you won't be able to defend yourself in times of crisis. So when we talk about defense manufacturing, defense innovation, defense research and development, this is being today promoted through Atmanirbharta and Make in India initiatives, and they form essential element of how you go about defending your nation. Developing strategic infrastructure through agencies like BRO, etc. in border areas also is part of defending your nation. It also involves actually developing a strategic culture in the nation. You're having a defense university, think tanks, history cells, the School of International Studies in universities like this, or strategic studies. It also goes about building a strategic culture in the nation. It also about building martial traditions through institutions like NCC, Sainik schools, military schools. These are also important. All of them may not contribute towards, officers the cadets joining the armed forces, but it then gets distributed toward the whole country. And that's why the government of India has placed all these subjects under the Defense Secretary, whose remit is the Defense of India. Defense of India would also have to look at internal security, which I think is a major challenge for countries like us, which are multilingual, multi-religious, multicultural. As far as Netaji is concerned, his strategic foresight of defense of India was evident when in 1944 at the Tokyo University, he spoke about organizing national defense and safeguarding future freedom by setting up modern war industries. He visualized an industrial program for producing arms that India will need for its self-defense. Something like Atmanirbharta was thought about in 1944, so early. He saw defense from a strategic point of view and not just what's happening on the Burma front. A classic example of strategic foresight was when he negotiated and obtained Andaman and Nicobar Islands from Japan as the first bit of sovereign Indian territory and named them as Shahid and Swaraj. He also wanted to develop this martial traditions, which was actually slightly different from how the Britishers saw it, and about which I've already spoken about the Indian National Army. Let me now talk about the very inner core of national security architecture, that's the military preparedness. And it's that particular instrument which actually cannot fail. And when you talk about military preparedness, is the ability of armed forces to anticipate threats and respond to them by conducting military operations. And what does it involve? It will involve analysis of the emerging security environment, global and regional, including lessons from history. It will involve preparing operational plans for various kinds of contingencies which may face. Some of them were referred to by Ambassador Kamal Sibal. Wargaming, operational discussions, and refining this into firm operational plans. Validating these plans through exercises with troops, without troops, telephone battles, tabletop exercises, map exercises, SAN models. Training the armed forces in whatever plans we have made and motivating them. This is largely a function of people in uniform, and responsibility rests with the CDS and the 3 service chiefs. As far as Netaji and his military preparedness, we all know he created the Indian National Army, a force of almost about 40,000 personnel, and trained them, motivated them, and led them into battle. He ensured professional training from them, and he also established the first all-women combat regiment, the Rani of Jhansi Regiment. This demonstrated his concern for gender equality, which we thought much, much later. INA entered into the Burma campaign through the Arakans, actually. That's where their first encounter was with the British Indian Army and the British forces. Thereafter, of course, they planned an operation towards independence of India through Nagaland and Manipur, Operation Yugo, which he planned jointly with General Mutaguchi. And they were successfully able to raise the Indian national flag on Indian territory, the mainland territory in Moirang in April 1944. And his last engagement was, of course, in the battle in the plains of Imphal and where he fought at Ukhrul. So Netaji actually essentially tried to create a second front which compelled the British to divert resources and eventually leading them to losing their hold on the Indian military's loyalty. Now I'll switch on to a slightly different subject, but that again is connected with national security. It's about colonialism, a colonial mindset, and cognitive colonialism. I'll talk about these 3 in one sequence. Netaji fought against colonial power for freedom of India, its territory, and its people, while attempting to eradicate a colonial mindset. We are attempting to eradicate this colonial mindset while the colony was, of course, liberated. A mindset that promotes servitude, submission, and subjugation. And Honorable Prime Minister has been calling it as Gulami ki Mansikta se Azadi. On independence, India had before it two choices. One was to inherit the legacy of INA and build a nationalist army right from scratch. The second was to carry on with the British in an army, a well-organized, readily available force that was battle-tested and battle-hardened. We decided to choose the easier option. It may be difficult for me to comment at present on the wisdom of the decision, but maybe circumstances that time contrived to choose the British Indian Army model because of impending operations in Hyderabad and Jammu and Kashmir. 75 years later, we are trying to remove the vestiges of that colonialism that exists. And when we say that this colonialism is through symbology, is through history, traditions, and of course, a mindset. So when you talk about symbology, the crest, colors, ranks, etc., they all have been Indianized. History, the source of motivation today is based on the battles which Indian Army post-independence has fought. The standards, colors, and battle honor of the past are only now for historical records. I've just spoken about traditions. Jai Hind was just one of them. But most important is that we need to change our mindsets. That is important. And let me now talk about something which is a new challenge, which I think is looming before us, cognitive colonialism, a term which I have coined. Historically, colonialism can be understood as the domination and reshaping of societies to serve the interests of the stronger colonizing power. Traditional colonialism rested on physical occupation and direct rule, which involved dismantling of indigenous governance, laws and culture, education, administration, religious beliefs, and economic structures were permanently altered. Military power was used by the British to obtain a favorably political decision from Indian rulers, either through coercion or through actual use of force. Netaji fought against this physical colonialism and ensured that India became free physically. Later, this traditional colonialism was replaced by new colonialism, which was conducted with subtlety and finesse through economic coercion, indirect political intervention, and calibrated use of global institutions, thus influencing the priorities of developing nations to suit the needs of a new colonizer. In new colonialism, political decisions of the subject state were being influenced by economic power and maybe technological coercion, denial of technology, etc. But today, we are entering into an era of what I call as cognitive colonialism. This targets the intellectual and psychological domains by exploiting asymmetries in information and communication technologies by use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, etc. The fundamental objective is this: to dominate the mindset of population through information operations, manipulating narratives, psychological operations, thus influencing opinions of people and subsequently their governments. Such operations are aided by increasing dependence of the society on digital media on one hand, and advances in technologies like artificial intelligence, communication networks, machine learning, data analytics, and so on. So what we can witness as social disorder could be in the nascent stage of cognitive colonialism. Remember, the harbingers of traditional colonialism were actually led by trading companies. We all know East India Company. Neo-colonialism was led by multinational companies. We don't have to name them, a number of them. And cognitive colonialism will be ushered by large IT companies, data mining companies, technological titans. They may be forebearers of such a colonialism. Economic colonialism and cognitive colonialism are actually a post-Netaji phenomenon. What Netaji practiced and promoted was this concept of nationalism. I believe we can build resilience in a society to protect itself against such kind of engineered social unrest and cognitive manipulation. So this I thought was important. It's a kind of a threat which I feel is there. Netaji also promoted freedom of ideas, thoughts, innovation. He always spoke about indigenous, innovative and imaginative kind of a mindset, which was anti-colonial. And I'll spend some time on talking about free thinking and innovation. Normally, when we talk about innovation or innovative mindset, we naturally associate this or relegate it to defense manufacturing, defense R&D, etc. I don't think we have to move beyond laboratory startups and defense production lines. Innovation actually begins slightly upstream in institutions like this, where we are permitted to think, question, dissent, and recombine ideas. Without free thought, organizations only optimize what already exists. Innovation is a product of ability to think differently. I think first and foremost for the defense services is that to think differently, because the threats and challenges which India faces are unique to itself. So hence we have to find our own solutions to those threats and challenges. Western concepts, Western weapon systems will only introduce predictability in warfare, and there'll be no element of surprise, and surprise is an element of victory actually in warfare. So I think we have to think slightly differently than this Western constructs, not only about strategy, but also about weapon systems. And for this, we need to take inspiration from Indian strategic culture. Indian culture offers a long tradition of adaptive, heterodox, and context-sensitive thinking rather than rigid doctrines. And in this, actually, Netaji drew his inspiration from Bhagavad Gita and modern reinterpretation of India's cultural and philosophical heritage, testing them as texts of duty, courage, and disciplined action. Netaji's interest in strategic thought and historical statecraft is comparable to Arthashastra's teachings, emphasizing realism, intelligence, and statecraft, thus connecting classical Indian strategic culture and contemporary doctrines on deterrence, alliance building, and internal security. Let me now talk about the current security environment, which I mentioned in the books, and this is one which I will not be able to connect with Netaji's thought process. So probably the world today is maybe in a similar kind of a global situation, could be similar to a pre-World War II situation, an era of great uncertainty and flux as it's prevailing today, also prevailed probably during Netaji's time. Today, traditional assumptions about stability, deterrence, clearly defined adversaries, foes, friends, etc. This is steadily eroding. The line between war and peace is blurring. What the world is witnessing is not change and transformation, but great disruption. And this disruption is geopolitical disruption, geoeconomic and technological disruption. And this has got huge implications for the military. So what I'll do is, I'll talk about its impact on the military more, then about what's happening on diplomacy and other fields. So when we talk about geopolitical disruptions, they may define the kind of type of conflicts we may fight, the nature of wars we may fight. Economic disruptions, supply chain disruptions may define the duration of that particular conflict, but technological disruptions will decide the outcome of those particular conflicts. So geopolitical uncertainty is largely a political and diplomatic challenge with military or security implications. We are passing through currently in the most dramatic moment of global geopolitics, and current events have ruptured the post-World War II global order. Such developments directly influence or challenge established global institutions, and there are no permanent friends or allies. The very concept of sovereignty, the very basis of a nation state, is getting challenged today. As far as technological uncertainties are concerned, we are all aware that technology will impact how we live, how we earn a livelihood, how will we work, play, learn, how will we produce, even reproduce, and how will we socialize. And there are a large number of technologies which are going about changing the way we live, and similarly, the way we are going to fight. The demise of the internal combustion engine, which had powered industrial revolution for past so many decades, is now on the decline. It's dead. It's been overtaken by EV technology. The sources of energy, the shift from traditional fossil fuels to renewable energy, bioengineering, genetic therapy, anti-aging research, artificial intelligence is being told as the most transformative. Its potential is comparable to like invention of electricity machine learning, data analytics, space technologies. So they're not only going to influence the way we live, but the way we're going to fight. So let me speak briefly about the kind of impacts which I think is going to happen. Firstly, at the rapid rate with which disruptions are happening, I don't think government structures, military organizations, etc., are geared to keep pace with such kind of a disruption. There's a new challenge which is emerging almost every day, and we are always playing a catch-up kind of a game with the fear of constant failure. So we're actually constantly on a fast-moving treadmill. There is also an increased propensity amongst nation states to use force for gaining those political objectives. And there's a total disregard for rule-based order, and this might is right kind of phenomenon we're seeing. Why this is happening is, I think, because technology today provides an option to you, long-range precision targeting. So there's no collateral damage, and hence there's no moral dilemma against the use of force for attainment of political objectives. Similarly, this what's happening is also democratization of this disruptive technology. Now it's being made available to smaller states, non-state actors. That's also happening. And hence, the world is entering into an era where they're no longer declared kind of wars, they're informal wars. That's more of a trend now. And sometimes the strategic stability at top is actually promoting proxy war, it's promoting gray zone warfare, it's also promoting hybrid kind of warfare. Another important trend what we're seeing is territorial integrity. This concept of international boundaries has lost meaning. Nations are looking to acquire territories that don't belong to them on grounds of national security. So to summarize these trends, dilution of concept of sovereignty, there's little respect for firm, legal, recognized boundaries. So these are going to define the kind of wars, nature of wars we'll fight in future. And technological disruptions, as I said earlier, will decide the outcome of these kind of conflicts. Now let me talk a little bit more about technological disruption, because that affects the military. So technologies were changing, the very character and nature of warfare. There were days actually when a war-winning strategy would be dependent on geography. Not anymore. Today is technology which is defining strategy and a war-winning strategy. And let's talk about revolution in military affairs. The first revolution in military affairs, which was largely maneuver, on which I spoke about strategy, that was important. That is because of advances in mobility, surface mobility like tanks, self-propelled guns, etc. that came about, or in air mobility like helicopters and all, and introduced concepts like air-land battle, blitzkrieg of the Germans, or deep battles of the Russians, and introduced at the operational level number of concepts like deep penetration, center of gravities, operational fires, turning movements, etc. So here the strategy was largely dependent on geography. The second RMA, that's the network-centric warfare, introduced due to advances in ICT and communication technologies. This resulted in battlefield transparency and very high degree of situational awareness, in which decisions could be taken faster. And over here, we see the tactics of the strategy becomes entirely independent of geography. That's the second trend. And what we are witnessing right now, or we are at the cusp of what I call as the third revolution in military affairs, which I say is convergence, because it's converging multiple technologies, because it's not one or two technologies we're going to influence warfare. It's a large number of technologies which are influencing warfare all together. And convergent warfare is actually combining kinetic with non-kinetic operations, contact with non-contact operations, manned with unmanned and autonomous, such kind of weapon systems. It's kind of converging tactics, operational art, and strategy together. It's converging the first evolution in military affairs with the second and third, and it's converging the traditional domains with the new domains of warfare. And the warfare of future will hence be always integrated, networked, and increasingly intelligent. Let me now talk about domains of warfare. We are all aware of the old domains of warfare and the new and the emerging domains of warfare. When I speak about old domains, they are land, maritime, and the seas. And of course, the new domains are cyberspace, electromagnetic spectrum, and the cognitive warfare. So warfare, if we see in the old domains, will always be long, it will be brutal, and it will be kind of a slugfest. And we're seeing this happening in, say, Ukraine. We're seeing this happening in Gaza, because weapon systems largely, and the strategy along with that, which is being used, is already had been developed, say, hundreds of years back. We're seeing tank for the last 100 years on the battlefield. Artillery guns, even, say, longer, rifles, muskets, etc. But warfare in the new domains, I believe, would be faster, smarter. And this is because it's easier to create asymmetries in new domains of cyberspace, etc. And this is what we witnessed in Operation Sindoor, or in to a large extent also in the conflict between Israel and Iran, which is a 12-day-long conflict. So over here, actually creating asymmetries, technological asymmetries in the new domains become important. It's difficult to say which war will be decisive, because war is actually flows out of your political intent, and if your intent is connected with land, then of course you could be fighting a war in old domain, which I said could be brutal long. So for a country like India, which has a disputed border, which again was mentioned earlier, two countries trying to claim what is Indian territory, for us, there could be a possibility of this long drawn-out war in old domains, for which we have to be always prepared. Yet we need to avoid.
टिंग टिंग, आपके लिए एक फेस्टिवल ऑफर है। क्यूआर कोड स्कैन करो, यूपीआई पिन डालो और 10,000 रुपए आपके बैंक अकाउंट में।
पिन डालूंगा तो पैसा खट से आएगा नहीं, झट से कट जाएगा। मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूँ।
Fair is connected with it. When we talk about air domain, which looking at lower airspace, which is now congested with lateral ammunitions and drones, which is also connected with, say, near space, which is almost about, say, 100 kilometers or maybe more, because of hypersonics and missiles coming in over there. When we talk about cyber, it's actually into a digital domain, so it's expanded much more. Similarly, space, when we talk, it's no longer related to the orbital space, that's the LEO, MEO, or geostationary orbit, but we're also looking at, say, cislunar space tomorrow. So these domains are expanding, and yet we need to connect and understand as to what's happening in all these domains and fight an integrated kind of battle, intelligent battle. So this is where actually warfare is heading, and this is where we also think that we have to be prepared for such kind of challenges in future. So what are we doing about it? That would be a question. So preparing for future threats and challenges demands a system-level transformation across how the Indian military thinks about war and organizes for it and nurtures its officers and men. This all will require conceptual or doctrinal kind of shifts, organizational and structural changes, cultural realignment, and procedural reforms, actually, so that we are able to adapt to this kind of a change. So as far as conceptual and doctrinal changes are concerned, we released a number of joint doctrines, which Professor Gautam Sen said that a number of them are now available in open domain, which people can read it. In fact, yesterday we released the military quantum mission policy framework. So it's not only doctrines. In this niche emerging technologies, how the military sees itself in the next, say, few years, we are releasing those documents, and they are in public domain. It's not only for our industry, also people for outside also. Post-Operation Sindoor, we are also looking at a framework which thinks and ideates on how warfare will evolve in future, and that will be part of our headquarter ideas as a future operations and analysis group. As far as organizational and structural changes are concerned, all three services are working towards it. You must have seen the Army looking at Bharat battalions, Agniban regiments, which are a fallout of Operation Sindoor. And of late, the government has given them sanction to reorganize its Mountain Strike Corps into IBGs, integrated battle groups, which will force application become slightly easier. And the ultimate would be, which we are trying to attempt at among the three services, those establishment of integrated theatre commands. As far as cultural changes are concerned, we are trying to create a joint culture which is slightly different from service-specific cultures in which we've been molded for the past 78 years. So this is what we are working at. Procedural changes would involve things related to procurements and sustenance, maintenance of equipment. We've already revised the DPM 2025, That's the Defense Procurement Manual that really looks after your revenue budget and sustenance. To look at how we are doing our acquisitions, capital acquisitions, we are going to revise a DAP, Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020. That's under revision, so that we do. We are also looking at how do we define our future capabilities. We no longer will be laying down it through a long-term integrated perspective plan. We are looking at an integrated capability development, which is a slightly different model, which is both stressed and capability based. That will harmonize the capabilities across three services. So this is how we are looking in the Indian Armed Forces about the future, and some parts of it were related to what Netaji foresaw. And as part of my concluding remarks, I would say that Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's military leadership, political outlook, and statesmanship offers enduring lessons. They remain highly relevant in ensuring national security, act as a source of motivation, and promote innovative ideas. The fourth generation and force application paradigm has changed over a period of time, but some of these principles remain constant. Innovative culture, ingenious approach, and imaginative application of mind are important. In the end, I'll end with a powerful expression that Netaji had coined and continues to inspire all of us. I started my talk with it. It embodies an affirmation of purpose, resolve, and unity. Jai Hind. Jawaharlal Nehru University, Ambassador Kamal Sibal. We have former Chief of Army Staff, Jal Deepak Kapoor. We have Chairman, National Security Advisory Board, Shri Alok Joshi. Professor Amitabh Matu, Dean of School of International Studies. Professor Gautam Sen. Professor Meeta Mehra. Distinguished guests, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you and a very happy Basant Panchami. A little more than 4 decades ago, when I joined the National Defense Academy IMA as a young second lieutenant, the normal mode of greetings amongst the armed forces officers used to be as per hour of the day. Good morning, good evening. And with the men, it used to be as per the regimental traditions. It could be Ram Ram, Sat Sri Akal, Tagda Raho, Jai Durga, etc. Couple of years back, the three services spontaneously and voluntarily switched on to Jai Hind, the salutation coined by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose for the Indian National Army. It was not only a salutation, but a unified identity that bypassed creed and caste, a prerequisite for a stable national framework. It embodied patriotism and instilled national pride. Jai Hind literally translates into victory to India. This victory, visualized by Netaji, was to be gained by the collective effort of all Indians. Even today, securing that independent India, which he got us, or a sovereign India, requires a cohesive and a whole of government kind of an approach. This month of January, it marks the auspicious beginning of a new year. January, if I may say, is a month of actually festivals, not religious festivals. These are secular, non-religious, nationalist festivals. 12th of January was National Youth Day. We commemorate Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary. 15th of January was Army Day. Today we are here on Parakram Divas, that's Subhash Chandra Bose's birthday. On 26th, we are going to be celebrating the joy of being free and being a republic. And on 30th, it will be Martyrs' Day, when the father of nation fell down to assassin's bullet. For me, it's a matter of great privilege to be here at the JNU on Parakram Divas and on this auspicious month of January. Professor Matu has asked me to speak about the 2 books I've written lately. That's Ready, Relevant and Resurgent, Part 1 and 2. They relate to national security and warfare. More about the latter. That's, I think, because that's our bread and butter, Fauji's. So I'm more comfortable writing about how warfare is evolving. So the books largely contain articles on that. And I would like to thank the university and the School of International Studies for having invited me for this memorial lecture. In my view, so what I'll do is I'll speak of whatever I didn't. I'll take out 2-3 subjects from those books, and I'll speak in context of what Netaji did for that. What was his outlook on that? I'll try and connect these two. So let me speak about Netaji first. In my views, he was a scholar statesman, an inspiring military leader. In 1943, from Singapore, he gave a call for total mobilization when he said, Delhi Chalo. That call actually aroused nationalist consciousness and exhorted all Indians to fight for India's freedom. He created an army from surrendered troops in Singapore, an army which was defeated, demotivated, disillusioned. He motivated them with a national cause and fervor to fight whom? At that time, the strongest military power of that time, Great Britain. He motivated them to find their own regiments, the British Indian Army, which contained their kith, kin, and fellow beings. That's actually a no mean achievement. This clarity of purpose resulted in raising of morale and rekindling of the fighting spirit amongst the National Army. Apart from being a soldier statesman, Netaji also, in my view, was a politico-military leader and the only politico-military leader which India has produced. As a political leader, his views on India's freedom were non-negotiable. He had a strategic foresight and vision to understand the global power dynamics of his time. Even today, as India navigates this polycentric, unstable, uncertain global disorder, Netaji's policy of assertive diplomacy and strategic realism is more relevant than ever before. He created a government, built an army, planned campaigns, negotiated alliances, managed logistics for that army, demonstrating close relationship between a political vision, astute diplomacy, and military operations. He was a military leader not because he donned a military uniform. I think he was a military leader because he led by personal example. He resigned from the Indian civil services, underwent multiple prison sentences, escaped from house arrest in Calcutta, traveled incognito all the way to Afghanistan, and from there on to Germany. He took that epic and perilous journey in a submarine all the way from Germany, including a mid-sea transfer near Madagascar into a Japanese U-boat, Japanese submarine, all with the aim of liberating India. He frequently traveled by air and visited troops to review the progress of battle, all this while risking his life. Japanese at that particular moment did not enjoy that classic air superiority, so every time he flew, his life was in danger. So from that point of view, he was classically a military leader. The full impact of INA's achievements on India's independence movement is yet to be recognized. Still lesser known is the military achievements of Indian National Army. We all know that the history is written by victors and not by the vanquished. The military history that I read as a young officer, as a middle-level officer trying to prepare for my staff college or promotional exams, was the history which was written by the British. I read books like Defeat into Victory by Field Marshal William Spill, Chindit Operations, Campaign in Burma, Road Past Mandalay, John Masters, etc. Some of these books, and including the official history recorded by the British War Office in London, portrayed the Indian National Army in very poor light. INA was poorly equipped. Its regiments did not have tanks, did not have artillery, supporting forces which are required to fight modern battles. Yet they fought, and they fought with motivation. And if you know, the attrition rate which INA suffered is the highest any army has ever suffered. The fact which is very little known. So INA is a military formation, and as a movement awakened national consciousness. INA was also an expression in unity in diversity because its organization transcended region, caste, religion, or gender. Let me now talk about what I've written in these two books, which I said R, and R. And